is where Dave and I plan this year's company holidays.
Let's go through the list.
Easter.
Too religious.
St. Patrick's Day?
Too white.
Mother's Day?
Way too cisgendered.
All of your usual holidays have been canceled this year.
But we still have Karl Marx's birthday! Ha!
Need a real reason to party? Find a new job at redballoon.work.
Welcome back to CrossPolitic on the Fight Laugh Feast Network. This segment's brought to you by the Armored Republic. The mission of Armored Republic is to honor Christ.
The body of others, you know?
I see what you're doing there.
Yeah, there you go.
By equipping free men with tools of liberty necessary to preserve God-given rights. In the Armored Republic, there's no king but Christ.
That's right.
They're free craftsmen. Body armor is a tool of liberty. They create tools of liberty. Free men must remain ever vigilant against tyranny wherever it appears. God has given us the tools of liberty needed to defend those rights he bestowed to us. Armored Republic is honored to offer you those tools, so visit them at AR, the number 500 armor.com. We're very grateful to have with us on the show today Miss Naomi Wolf. She's best-selling author, columnist, and professor. She's a graduate of Yale University. Received a doctorate from Oxford. Watch out, Gabe. She's smart. She
still got that doctorate? They let her keep it after this book?
We'll find out. She's co-founder and CEO of dailyclout.io, successful civic tech company. And today she's here to talk with us about her book, The Bodies of Others. Naomi, thanks for coming on CrossPolitic.
Thanks so much for having me.
So tell us, when did you break free from the COVID narrative?
Gosh, I don't think I ever was persuaded by the COVID narrative.
Okay.
And, the reason, well, like everyone else, I should say, March, April, May of 2020, I was willing to think something unprecedented is here. It's a medical emergency. I better just do what I'm being told by the authorities.
Right.
I confess, like everyone else, I assumed that there was merit in the guidance that we were getting.
Right.
But very quickly, I started to ask questions, notably when probably May to June in New York State of 2020, it became clear that we were under emergency law, and the then Governor Cuomo was not going to let us out of emergency law. And I wrote a book in 2008 during the Bush II era called The End of America, in which I pointed out that there are 10 steps to fascism that would-be dictators always take, whether they're on the left or on the right, and that step 10 is emergency law. So I knew from history that you never get your rights back once you're at the stage of emergency law without a civil war or something else really awful. And the other thing that gave me pause really early on is that I'm an English major and, I have a doctorate. And so that means I read a lot of books going back the last 300 or 400 years in English, when there were waves of infectious diseases. This is not a new thing in human history. And whether it was typhus and cholera in the 1830s or 1840s, whether it was yellow fever in Philadelphia in the 1780s, whether it was the Great War and the Spanish flu epidemic, we've been through, or, HIV, which I'm old enough to remember, the, terrible waves of HIV in the 80s. We've been through horrible waves of much more serious infectious diseases than even COVID. And I knew that the guidance that we were being given, which really was invented by Xi Jinping in March of 2020 of lockdowns and distancing and masking, human beings had never done that before. So, and they'd survive, civilization had survived like never before, no matter how bad the epidemic, had whole economies been shut down. Never before outside North Korea or like the Warsaw Ghetto in the West, were healthy populations restricted in their assembly, unless they were being targeted with theft of their assets, like Jim Crow laws or like, reservations where Native Americans were herded, and their assembly and trade were restricted. So from studying history and from studying literature, I knew that everything we were being told was super anomalous. It was the opposite of public health guidance of the past. And also that history showed that when you restrict people's assembly, that's the first step towards stealing all their stuff.
But Naomi, people in the past are more ignorant than we are, and so standing 6 feet apart is going to work. It's just right.
Right. Clearly, yeah.
So how do we avoid, a lot of people, I think, now look back and say, we made a lot of mistakes in 2020. We kind of have this hindsight vision where we're like, okay, we understand that we kind of got duped a little bit, or we shouldn't have followed the government, or the science, Fauci was wrong, whatever. We have this 2020 hindsight now. How do we maybe not have that? How do we actually look at what's going on and say, this is crazy right here and now, and how we're trying to deal with COVID? The government's actually being tyrannical now. How do we have current clarity in our vision instead of having to look back and say, okay, maybe we can correct this and never happen again?
Yeah, well, I mean, how? By doing it, right? I mean, look at what's happened to us. We haven't gotten anything back. We're allowed a little bit of seeing each other's faces. We're allowed a little bit of our kids get to go to school, but we're not free. In 28 states, they still have emergency law. I'm sitting here in New York State. Wow. We're under emergency law to this day. Wow. People don't know that President Biden, for whom I'm embarrassed to say I voted, he extended emergency powers for the 8th time in April of 2022. Yep. But this time he extended emergency powers in an open-ended way with no terminus date. That is the definition of a coup. So, people to this day are parents are emailing me saying, I'm so scared my, adult child is going to go back to college or go back to state schools or private schools in the fall and be forced to take a booster just to stay in school. People to this day, I am in touch with firefighters who are not allowed to get their jobs back because they don't want to take a hideously damaging, super untested, totally ineffective mRNA injection. So we're in the middle of it still. Nothing is behind us. And I think that it's very important for us to not habituate, right? Because if we habituate, then we will never get our freedoms back or our country back. We have to mass non-comply.
You just need to move to Idaho.
But no, because our governor only barely just lifted.
He ended it though. He ended it finally.
Yeah, he finally just lifted our emergency.
And he's
order.
a Republican.
Really?
Yeah. He lifted it in I think it was April 2020 is actually when he
2022.
Yeah, 2022 because primaries were happening in May, a month later.
So it was a game.
I mean, as a former political consultant, that really worries me because that means that he lifted it before the primaries, or everyone's easing up before the midterms. The minute the new faces are in, it's lockdown again. That's not freedom.
Now, in your book, you say that the real goal of all this is to destroy Western and human culture. And that sounds like a conspiracy theory. Is it really that bad? I know all of us have now become sort of, if we're a denier in any way, shape, or form, we're conspiracy theorists. But but is it that bad?
Well, let's look at religion. I'm a member of a 4,000-year-old religious tradition. I'm Jewish. And literally every synagogue in New York State in this area, except for the ultra-Orthodox, to this day are not convening in person, to this day, which means, kids are having bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs on Zoom, right? I have elderly relatives who haven't been to synagogue in person in over 2.5 years.
Wow.
Across the river, so I'm not vaccinated for reasons that are really nobody's business but my own, but I'm not ashamed of it.
But please tell us. Please tell us. Actually, right? We're safe.
I'm happy to, but I'll circle back to that. But my point is, this great tradition, which invented monotheism, and held my people together in century after century of persecution. We survived a Holocaust. We're not surviving. I'm not allowed to walk into the synagogue across the river because I'm unvaccinated. I wasn't allowed to go with my mom and my brother in Corvallis, Oregon to Friday night services because I'm not vaccinated. The only people they allow into the synagogue are double vaxxed and boosted, and they're wearing face masks.
You have
so I'm not allowed.
leprosy. You have leprosy.
Right. But I mean, it's very, very tragic because it means that this great religion, which brought so much to the
home. It's where you build your legacy, where traditions are started, seeds are planted, meals are shared, and stories are told. We are Chris and Natalie Carpenter, owners of Story Real Estate, and our team of top agents helps people find homes in Moscow, Idaho, and around the country.
Have you thought about a move? Contact us to get connected with a top agent who shares your values and puts your family first. Or reach out to us about our Moscow relocation guide.
Wherever you're looking to go, we can help you find home. Call us at Story Real Estate or visit us at storyrealestate.com and start building your legacy.
The season of Augustine and the season of Cassiodorus were very different moments in a crucial transformation that occurred in the history of the Western liberal arts. All right, so just stay like this. How am I doing here? So, yeah, you don't like this, huh? What does a Christian education look like when non-Christians are the ones who control the institutions of learning? This is a question that confronted Bishop Augustine of Hippo in North Africa in the 5th century AD. Augustine lived at the twilight of the Roman Empire. He himself had been trained with the best learning that Rome at that time had to offer. He himself actually came through the ranks and taught rhetoric in some of the best schools. And it was then, after he had come of age, that he converted to Christianity, but he wanted to continue the project of education, but this time for Christians. And so he had to confront the question, what does a Christian education look like when the unbelievers control the field? When they control the institutions, when the whole apparatus and curriculum of learning emerge from a pagan environment. And so Augustine wondered, what is it that Christians should jettison? What is it that Christians can embrace? What is it that Christians can adopt but in modified form? These are the questions that Augustine confronted when he sought to educate Christians in an environment when unbelievers dominated the field. A century later, we see a man in the south of Italy named Cassiodorus, who faced a very different educational landscape. He had to ask, what did a Christian education look like in an environment where unbelievers had abandoned the project of education altogether? The infrastructure of learning had entirely eroded. If education was to proceed at all, it had to proceed on the foundation of Christianity. The Christians had to be the ones preserving education. What does a Christian education look like when Christians are the ones forming the institutions, when Christians are the ones organizing the curriculum? Well, these two seasons in the history of education, the season of Augustine and the season of Cassiodorus, just 100 years apart, were very different moments in a crucial transformation that occurred in the history of the Western liberal arts. We're going to be studying this story. We're going to be going back to the sources. We're going to go back to Augustine. We're going to go back to Cassiodorus. We're going to ask ourselves, which of their predicaments most resembles our own? Which can we learn from Augustine's period? What can we learn from Cassiodorus's period? As we confront these questions, we're going to engage these sources, and we invite you to join us here at New St. Andrews College.